Hello and welcome to the show. I'm here starting the career mode on F1 2015. The first race of the season is in Australia at the Albert Park circuit, a track that I thoroughly enjoy. This is very much my sort of circuit. A lot of medium speed and high speed chicanes, quite a difficult place to overtake, mind, but yeah, I do really like driving around this track. Now, as far as teams, I have opted to drive for Ferrari, a couple of reasons. The first one being, well, Raikkonen is my favourite Formula 1 driver, so I kind of wanted to drive as Raikkonen. The bigger reason being the difficulty. So I've set the AI to the Legend difficulty. Now, at a track that I like, places such as Albert Park here, driving the Ferrari, it's a pretty damn competitive car. So on this difficulty with a decent car, I can be fighting, hopefully, towards the front. But at tracks that I don't like quite so much, so places like Singapore and Malaysia, places that I tend to struggle a little bit on, I probably won't be fighting at the front, but I should still find myself in a battle somewhere in the mid-pack, you know, with the likes of the Force Indias and the Saubers and so on. I should always, hopefully, through this career mode, be having cars to race with. I mean, if I picked like a lower team, I was thinking of running as McLaren. Certainly, at Australia, I can run fairly competitively, but if I go to a track that I don't like so much, that I'm a little bit slower around, I tend to end up in kind of no man's land. So I figured this was a good balance to go with the Ferrari. And the Ferrari is actually quite a nice car to drive. I was quite impressed with the way that this car drove. With all of these vehicles, you do have to be careful with oversteer. It's something that yeah, it certainly catches me out a few times. These cars do move around quite a lot. They're quite challenging to drive. I like them. It's just you've got to be aware of it, especially, you know, you run a wheel over the curb or you try and put down just that little bit too much power out of a slow speed corner. The back end will move around quite a lot, as both me and Nazza find out. I got quite a lot sideways through there. Not really ideal. Got about a millimetre away from ending up in a gravel trap as well around that next corner. Yeah, you've definitely got to be careful with these cars, but they are challenging. They are an exciting thing to drive. As we come up to cross the line, I actually set a really rather fast time on the prime tyres. A 27.8 is pretty damn respectable on these, and then I promptly throw it away. The first corner, I just got it wrong, and yeah, that was me in the wall. That was my adventures of practice. I did go fractionally fast. I stuck some option tyres on later on in the session, went a little bit quicker, a 27.4, 7/10 down on the Mercedes, but it was enough to get me into second. You see, relatively competitive around here. And you know, all of the times of the cars are pretty close. Hamilton's Mercedes and Bottas's car are only like a 10th of a second down on me. When we go further down, the Stevens Manor managed to get into 18th. He beat the Maldonado's Lotus and wasn't that far off the Honda, or the McLaren Honda of Button. Come to qualifying. Now, I'd opted to do the full qualifying, so we've got the full sort of three session one. For Q1, seeing as I'd actually gone pretty damn fast on these tyres in practice, I figured I could make it through without having to use up a set of the options. That was the plan. I mean, this wasn't a particularly good lap. You saw I was a bit shonky through the far chicane, ran a little bit wide, had a wheel on the grass through the next corner. This wasn't a particularly perfect lap. I certainly wasn't expecting to go as quick as I did before, but I was hoping it was going to be enough as we come through the final corner. I just wanted to get through, save some tyres. We are only doing 25% races, but I still didn't want to have to use too many sets of the soft tyres, just in case I fluff up a lap and have to go in and sort of try again. I figured it was worth trying to save the tyres. A 29.1. I was hoping was good enough, having seen the practice times. I was reckoning that should be enough to keep me in the top 15. It was a little bit nerve-wracking watching the times, especially after it's gone sort of past like 2 minutes remaining. There's not much I can do now. Still sat in 7th. It was very, very close, sort of round from me, or sort of from me down to Hulkenberg was only like half a second. So yeah, it was a little bit close around there, but it was enough to see me safely through in 7th. Rosberg went pretty damn quickly as well on the prime tyres. Vettel went fast, being relatively high up the leaderboard without having to go to the softer tyres. I think Perez tried to get through on the prime tyres, didn't really work. Kvyat just made it through. Unsurprising perhaps to see the two McLarens and the two Manors out at the bottom of the table. Vettel. The second qualifying session, not a huge amount happened. For me, I would go in third behind both of the Mercedes. Vettel actually very impressive. 27.7 on the prime tyre, still in fifth, getting through with them. So he'd managed to not really use any of his soft tyres. Massa also making it through on the prime tyres. Two Red Bulls fell out. I think both trying to get through with the primes there. Again, very, very close. The mid pack were incredibly close. And quite a gap up to us at the top. Sort of a 2-second gap between me and third and sort of the cars in 7th and 8th. Come on to the final qualifying session. My first run, I'd managed to get my first lap in the 26s, a 26.5, that had me on a provisional pole at the moment. A lot of cars, though, hadn't run, as you can see. I was leading Bottas in second, and Grosjean was in third at this point. I don't think Rosberg had done a sort of a proper lap where he'd run on the other tyres. So, yeah, I was on provisional pole, but it was a case of I kind of wanted to make sure. I'd seen the Mercedes had been going at this sort of pace through the previous qualifying sessions, so I had to go again in an attempt to try and sort of secure the pole position. I wasn't actually necessarily expecting to end up on pole around here. I thought I was going to do relatively well. I didn't think I could quite make it on pole, but I was certainly in the fight. The corner that I really struggled with, the corner just coming onto this straight, that was a turn that I had a lot of problems getting the power down in the Ferrari. It wanted to spin the wheels up a lot. Through here, when you get things right, it is a fantastic, an absolutely lovely corner when you get everything spot on. When you get it a little bit wrong, you're in an awful lot of trouble. It is such a fast sort of chicane. Again, using all of the curb this time, not getting the car sideways, carrying as much speed as I dare through the next turn. They've got a big stop into this hairpin. Got to be careful not to spin the wheels up too much, and everything is going right on this final run. And the final corner is also an excellent corner. Around that final turn there again, just carrying as much speed as you dare. And I crossed the line at 26.4, my new fastest lap for qualifying. It wasn't a huge improvement. There wasn't much more that I could do though, and it was just enough to beat out Rosberg's Mercedes. So he did a 26.5, but it was only him that got in the 26s. The rest of the field didn't go particularly quickly in this firing. Vettel went faster on the prime tyres in the second qualifying session than he did in this final one. He only did 28.5, and that was 5th. Everybody went really slow in this final qualifying session, so yeah. Well, I managed to get on pole, which I was certainly pleased about. Come race day, though, and conditions would change. The weather forecast had been threatening showers for both qualifying and practice. They never materialised at all. But, yeah, come race day, and it was drizzling. It wasn't sort of super heavy rain, but yeah, there was some drizzle to contend with. I love racing in the rain, so I was kind of excited. Also a little bit nervous, as I'd been going quite quickly in the dry, and yeah, wasn't quite sure how the car was going to fare. Relatively low downforce setup on this. The start's always scary when you have no assists on, trying to get the car off the line as quickly as possible. It wasn't a fantastic start from me as the Mercedes tried to swap me. It's 3 wide into the first corner and managed to keep it around the outside of Rosberg's car. Hamilton just completely runs out of road on the outside, and I've managed to make a clean break from the field. Got myself a little bit of a gap back to the Mercedes, and because of Hamilton trying to go the long way round and being really slowed down, he'd caused, you can just about see Rosberg's car in the mirror, and Hamilton, he's miles back from the start. It went about as well as I could expect. I didn't get off the line particularly cleanly. This is always tricky, especially having not done a wet weather start before. Yeah, I was having some issues, but I got off fast enough. I got quick enough off the line to keep ahead of the Mercedes. And you can see on this first lap, I was doing a pretty good job of getting a bit of a safety margin back to Rosberg. Now, further back, there was a yellow flag that went away very quickly. I was curious to see what happened. It was Sainz that ran a little bit wide through the first section, tried to come back on the track, and there was no space. Got bounced and spun into the wall, and then proceeds to completely fail at doing a 3-point turn. It's I don't know how it's wet. You could just boot it and spin the car around fairly easily, but no, the Toro Rosso had all manner of issues getting turned around. But that's what the yellow flag was for on the first lap. As the race progressed, I may have made a good start. However, I wasn't dropping the Mercedes. They were keeping up, and you can see in the mirrors just about. Hamilton and Vettel had both joined this train of cars. However, they could not find a way past me. as I said, the Australian Grand Prix can be, or this Australian circuit can be quite a difficult place to overtake. Because the corners tend to be pretty damn fast, and especially when there's no DRS at all, now being in the rain. A lot of the corners are medium speed. There's not a huge braking zone for any of them, and the Mercedes just couldn't get in a position to really have a dive, even with me running a little bit wide through there. Rosberg's too far back to try anything as we come up towards this hairpin, perhaps one of the better overtaking spots if you're close enough. Again, the Mercs are just too far back and they can't do anything about it. And I was quick out of this final turn. In the wet, I was getting really good drive out of the final turn. And the Mercedes, while yes, they've got lots of straight line speed, they can't do anything about the Ferrari. They're too far back. And again, coming up towards these first couple of corners, I was getting really good drive off the turns. And you see the size of the gap that I've managed to pull back to them just through those couple of corners. And now they can't do anything. They're far too far back to have a lunge into this next turn. I was just doing enough. I think they were technically the faster cars. We were all setting pretty damn similar lap times, to be honest, but the fact that they sort of caught up to me would suggest that, or certainly this fact that Hamilton caught up to this battle and Vettel caught up and so on, yeah, would suggest they were the slightly faster cars, but there was nothing they could do to get past. I was having a few issues, though, with getting the power down. I ran it a little bit risky through there. You see the back of the Ferrari was moving around quite a lot. This is the turn, though, that I was having real problems. I was having problems in the dry, let alone when it starts raining. I had a wheel on the grass, and now the tyres were starting to wear a tad as well. Wheel on the grass and the wet. I got myself in a lot of trouble. Rosberg's up the inside having a look, but I'm not going to give up the lead that easily. I fight back, get the cut back through the part of the chicane, and it's round the outside. Rosberg backs out of it. Raikkonen was a bit displeased. Apparently there was a bump. I didn't actually notice a bump when I was driving, but the fact with Raikkonen with his hand out the cockpit suggests there may have been a little bit of a bump through there, but we were fine, and I managed to retain the lead and promptly carrying too much speed through the next corner. That put me in trouble again. Rosberg's now trying to look around the outside, but there's no real space to do. It's very hard to go around the outside of that hairpin. And again, final corner. Even getting a little bit of a slide, I still have enough sort of drive, enough acceleration out of there. Rosberg is beginning to catch. He's in the slipstream and got the much better engine for straight line speed, but he can't do anything. He's too far back, and again I've pulled this gap through that first complex of corners. He's much closer this time round, still not close enough to have a look, still not brave enough to have a big dive. In all of this fighting, now Bottas, you can just see it in the mirrors, Bottas has joined in. At this stage, I think I was looking in the mirrors more than I was looking forward. That was, it was just, I had to constantly was worrying about where the Mercedes were, where was I going to have to be defending, would I have to defend in this corner. I was doing well enough though. I was, again, now I've been quick through a couple of corners and now I'm slightly out of range of the Mercedes. Is up to my bogey corner for this track. Again, don't get a win on the grass this time. Still doesn't matter to try and put the power down, get a huge slide in the Ferrari, but this time I was far enough ahead. I had sort of 7-8 tenths of a second over the cars behind, and he couldn't do anything about it. And then through the chicane, there's very little braking for that chicane. Okay, admittedly there's a little bit more now that we're in the wet and so on, but there's still not much that he could do about it. And this carried on for the first half of the race. The Mercedes could not find a way past. I just continued to defend. Again, another big slide, trying to get the power down. Of course, the tyres are wearing more and more. Rosberg has a really good run. I can cover the inside this time, though. He has to go the long way round. Ends up, I think he outbrakes himself a little bit, ends up out wide. I sort of squeeze him out as well. And Hamilton makes a move and goes up into second place. And they've kind of tangled with each other and now dropped back a little bit. It was at this point, the engineer was telling me to come into pit. I didn't want to come into pit. While my tyres were starting to hurt, I didn't really want to pit because, well, all of us at the front are all in a big group. Now, okay, I wouldn't have to stack behind Vettel. However, I didn't want to get sort of tangled up with cars, sort of like being released from the pit stop. I didn't want to get tangled up with all of them. I was still thinking there could be some issues with cars stacking and cars getting going again. I didn't want to risk it. Now, this was a calculated risk, seeing as, well, they were all going to come into pit stops. If they didn't fall over each other, they would have some nice fresh tyres for a lap, and they may well do the undercut on me. So for a lap, for their outlap, they can go very, very quickly, while I'm, of course, struggling with some rather worn tyres on my in-lap. It was a risk, though, that I was willing to take, and it paid off really rather nicely. While, yeah, my in-lap wasn't the perfect lap, certainly wasn't my fastest lap of the race with my slightly ruined tyres. Obviously, they fell over each other in the pit lane, or maybe they got into traffic on their out lap. Either way, I had a huge gap now back to the cars behind. Rosberg was always likely to be in trouble, as he was having to stack behind Hamilton. For whatever reason, they decided to bring both of them in on the same lap. As you can see, I had a big margin to the vehicles behind. Hamilton came out in second. Bottas got up to third. You can see on the little mini-map, Bottas and Vettel were relatively close together. And the avoiding the chaos in the pit lane paid off nicely. For me, it all worked out how I had wanted it to. Unfortunately, at some point, I'm not quite sure what happened. I managed to put the car into lean fuel mode without realising it. Ended up running for a good sort of 2 or 3 laps before I realised the car had gone to that mode. Which, by the time we come to the end of the race, Hamilton had managed to close the gap. As soon as I saw Hamilton was catching like quite a lot a lap, I started I thought I was driving terribly before I realised that. Stuck it back up into sort of standard fuel mode, and then the gap remained about a 1 second gap between me and Hal. It remained fairly steady to that gap, and we absolutely dropped Bottas and Vettel. You can see they're not even on the mini-map anymore. I don't know if it's even going to show up their splits or their gaps anymore. Yeah, they completely and utterly plummeted away, and Rosberg wasn't doing very much either. So it's just down to me and Hamilton on this final lap, and it was much the same story as it had been the rest of the whole race. Hamilton just couldn't get close enough at any of the overtaking points. In fact, I pulled a fair gap through this. It's kind of the second sort of end of the first sector, start of the second sector, that I could pull this really big gap, and while I'd be a little bit slow through this next bit, they could never get close enough to make an overtake. As far as the weather goes, it was just dreary all day. That was another concern I had, that the weather was suddenly going to change and somebody would dive in and get some slick tyres, and there's always that strategy element, but it just remained exactly the same. Just an entirely dreary day. I was a little bit slow through the chicane on this final lap. Hamilton did close up a little bit, but again, this final, provided I defended if I needed to, this is very tough to get past in these final few corners. I again had a wheel on the grass a little bit, just pushing a little bit too hard. Made sure I didn't go on the gravel this time round. But Hamilton was too far back. He couldn't try anything into the hairpin, and we're coming up towards one of my stronger corners, this final turn. Managed to get a good run off here while Hamilton was struggling a little bit, and it was going to be victory in my first race of the championship. The Ferrari takes the win. It was a thoroughly enjoyable race. While I did one overtake in the entire maybe you might count 2 if you count the start line one, getting back past Rosberg. Also Kimi Raikkonen smiling, which is very peculiar. Yeah, it was a really very enjoyable race. Despite not actually overtaking many cars, it was just constant defending from the Mercedes. It was really good fun. I thoroughly enjoyed, and I didn't quite expect to necessarily be winning my first race of this career mode. Bottas managed to get his car on the podium as well. So yeah, an interesting race. Pit stop screwed a lot of people over, and yeah, rain always makes things interesting. In the end, Vettel would get 4th ahead of Rosberg in 5th. Ricciardo would make up a lot of positions to end up in 6th. Yeah, it was a good start to the championship. A good start to the career mode, certainly. But that is it from me for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.